This is an exercise in jazz reharmonization using a simple tune like Happy Birthday. If I were to play Happy Birthday in the key of C major, just using primary triads, it would sound something like this. In the key of C major, the three primary triads are C major, chord 1, F major, chord 4, and G major, chord 5. Now we could improve the sound of that quite a bit simply by revoicing the chords. Instead of having all the notes huddled together down at the bottom, spread them out between the two hands. You could use the occasional inversion just here. I've got chord 5, G major, in first inversion with the third of the chord in the bass, that's B in the bass, which leads nicely up a semitone to the root of chord 1. Just here we could put a secondary dominant 7th chord. That's a C dominant 7th, which is the dominant 7th from the key of F, because we're going to an F major chord. I've put a link in the description below to a video about secondary dominants. Just here we could put chord 1 in second inversion, C major with the 5th of the chord, G in the bass, and then going to chord 5 and chord 1. So now let's look at the jazz reharmonization. So for the purpose of the exercise, I'm putting a chord on every beat. Now I've got to stress, you wouldn't actually necessarily want to do that all the time, because it can and probably does sound rather overcrowded putting a chord on every beat. There are, you know, some nice places where it works really well, like pickups to tunes. Often you can get a nice reharmonization for them, but you wouldn't want to overcrowd a tune by packing chords wherever you can. Okay, so the approach I'm going to use is a similar one to the one that you would often use in a traditional functional harmony exercise, where you look at the phrases and you start from the ends of the phrases and work backwards. So let's look at the first phrase. We'll think of the chord to go to harmonize the beat and then work our way backwards. So the obvious choice there is the G chord. To make it sound more colourful, we can make it G7 and also put a 13th in. The E is the 13th. So now we're going to work backwards, beat at a time, putting chords in. And we're primarily going to be looking at chords whose root goes down a 5th. So we want to think, right, what chord has a root that would go down a 5th to G? And the answer is D. So we could put, say, a D minus 7, just 2 minus 7, going to 5. We could make that a secondary dominant, D7, and perhaps put a 9th in, or a flattened 9th, or even an upper structure triad, depending on how much tension you would want. So that's an upper structure triad on the flattened 5th. I've put a link below to a video I did about upper structure triads. Okay, so now let's look at the chord before the D chord. The note is G. And a good choice there would be, say, A7. Because again, A going down to G is root progression down a 5th, from D to G down a 5th. The note before that, A, can we do an E7 there? And the answer is no, because the A becomes the 11th of E7. It clashes badly with the 3rd. What you can do though is make it an E minus 7 chord. That works really well. The A is the 11th there. So again, we've got a root progression down a 5th, E down to A. A7 is the dominant in the key of D, E minor 7 is 2 in the key of D, so you've basically got 2, 5 and then 1, except for we've made 1 a dominant 7th. Okay, now I've actually not used that though in the introduction. What I did was, instead of playing the D7 going to G7, I've used a tritone substitute. So a tritone substitute is when you have a dominant 7th chord and you replace it with a dominant 7th whose root is a tritone away. So instead of D, A flat. And I've preceded the A flat, not with the A7, although you could do that. I've used E flat 7, which is the dominant 7th of A flat. So what I ended up with was E minor 7, E flat 7, A flat 7, G7. Okay, the next phrase. Now the obvious chord there would be C again, but I'm going to just use a chord substitution there. You can often substitute the chord of C major with the chord of A minor. So I'm going to end on an A minor and make it A minor 7. So the chord before that then, I used E7 because that has root movement down a 5th. It's a secondary dominant of A minor. Now the 2 chords before that though, it's the one exception in this piece where I haven't used a root progression down a 5th, because instead of having a B chord, which wouldn't work really well on the note G, sounds a bit too harsh that, I just used a G7 chord. And before that I used chord 2, so that was a straightforward 2, 5, and then E7, A minor 7. Just a little arpeggio there, going root 5th up to the 9th, down to the root. Okay, so the next phrase. Now, the obvious chord there is F major at the end of the phrase. What you could do, it sounds really nice, is use a slash chord there. That's a triad over a different unrelated bass note. So we've got a G major triad, which then goes to the F chord. However, what I've done is I've substituted the F chord with a tritone substitute, a B7, and I've kept that triad movement, and it sounds like this. Now, it's quite tense, quite harsh, and you might not want to choose that, but it's an interesting thought that you can choose that. So you've got 2 upper structure triads over the B7 there. Okay, let's work back the beat before that, the 2 C's. Now, I've chosen this chord. That's an F sharp minor 7 with a flattened 5th, or you can call it F sharp half diminished chord. And that is chord 2 in the key of E minor. B7 is chord 2 in the key of E minor and E major. So you've got a 2-5-1 there. Okay, now the chord before that, I've used a C7. So we have got a root progression down a 5th here, C down to F sharp. It's not down a perfect 5th, but it is down a 5th, and it does work. And the chord before the C, I've just simply used G minus 7, which is chord 2 of C7. C7 is 5 in the key of F, G minus 7 is chord 2. I put a 9th in the A there, and a little arpeggio in the left hand, root, 5th, 10th. So we're on to the final phrase. So we'll end it in a conventional way. G7 going to C, put a flattened 9th in there, the A flat. I did a little run up to the G in the bit. And then that's a C6 chord. You can't really put C major 7 there because the melody note would clash with the B. So just an ordinary C6 chord. So the note before the G7 is a C, and just here I've just used a D7. So again, it's a secondary dominant, and I used an upper structure triad. I used the upper structure on the flattened 5th, the A flat major triad over the D7 shell in the left hand. To approach the D7, the melody note was E. I used an A minor 7. So again, that's a 2-5 progression. A minor 7 is 2 in the key of G, D7, 5 in the key of G. And then for the note, the beat before the A minor 7, the melody is 2 quavers on F, and I've approached A minor 7 with B flat 7. Put the 9th in there. So why have I chosen B flat 7? The obvious chord would have been E with root progression down a 5th. You could do that. The F in the melody would then be a flattened 9th. However, I've opted for the tritone substitute of E, which is B flat. Okay, I hope you found that useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Just a word of caution when you're doing this. As I said at the beginning, it's a good exercise. You can take any simple tune, nursery rhymes, anything like that. Divide it into phrases, work out the chord at the end of the phrase, then work your way back, mainly using secondary dominants or the chord 2 of those dominants, or tritone substitutes, using some upper structure triads, things like that. But just be wary of overdoing it. It's a good exercise. When you come in to reharmonize a real tune, you don't want to do it all over the place. Okay, thank you.